So welcome to today's presentation on improving your academic research. My name is Jose and I work here at the library. And so as I was saying, today is the sixth or the final part of the series we've been having this fall on research. And today's focus is going to be on citing and ethics. Mostly ethics, because we've done citing before, but if you need more assistance or you need more resources, I can help you with that. But trying to tie in what we've been talking about along this whole series, some of the themes. So let's begin. So what kind of ethics are we talking about here? Because there's a lot of them and there's different kinds. And so going along with the theme that each of these presentations has been covering, that is to help the student improve right academically, we're pretty much focusing on ethics, meaning academic integrity. Okay, but I wanted to start with some background to hopefully get a better sense of this topic, right? So here's a couple of definitions that I found regarding ethics. The first one being values relating to human conduct, right? Respect to the rightness and wrongness of certain actions and to the goodness and badness of the motives and ends of actions. So that can help maybe better understand moral principles of honesty and truth. That's more where we want to go. And for students in this presentation, the focus is acknowledging where their information comes from. Last presentation, I talked about how to use what you found, and the one before that, we talked about how to find those. So it's been a process, right? But if I were to summarize, what it is I wanted students to get out of this in one word, it was like acknowledging where they get their information. Because I think that's an area that may not be too clear about, and maybe it's not practiced enough. So I hope the rest of the presentation will address some of those issues. So along those lines, I came up with, we want students to be responsible and accountable, right? So what does that mean? That means students, as authors, are responsible for the validity of the content in their communications, right? It's not just the research paper or the essay, it could also be a presentation, whatever. So, and they must present facts as truth. They need to be rational and use evidence to support their claims. And we've talked about having a thesis, I think, in the second presentation. So an example, a student generalizes and writes that all Latinos are brown. This is irresponsible because most generalizations are weak. So, we want them not to use them. And many are even untrue, even if it's accepted, right? In circles in the media, doesn't mean it's accurate. So that's what we mean by being responsible and accountable. The last part is authority is earned via consistent behavior based on factual evidence and truth. So kind of the nutshell, if you will, of where I'm trying to go with ethics as it concludes this series along the same lines. What do we mean by accountability? You're subject to the obligation to report, explain, justify something. You're capable of being explained, being transparent and accessible. So we want students to search and find resources and use them, but just be transparent of where they get them. Don't make it a mystery, and I'll touch about that in just a second. Any questions? Any issues online? No. So I think a good place to remind students or to help students what ethics in general is to address, to let them know about the code of conduct that they're supposed to adhere to as a student of this institution. So they may not know that, but I think it kind of establishes, right, the seriousness of being honest and truthful and transparent. And so if they're not used to that, they can see this, and if they didn't know about this, there's another thing they will learn. But and the big one in the student code of conduct that deals with ethics is plagiarism. And most people have heard about plagiarism, but they may not necessarily understand it, or there's a lot of forms. And so along those lines, being supported by the institution. So I said previously, we want students to be transparent of their sources, right? And so last presentation, I talked about how to use the information that they got from their sources. So I've talked about some of these things already. So again, acknowledgement is the center of this slide and where I want to go with the focus of today's presentation. So a quick short list of the kinds of things we want students, and expect them to acknowledge whenever they get information from these, right? So we've talked about quotations, paraphrases, summaries. Number two, facts that aren't widely known or claims that are arguable. And there are plenty of those, right? I like the third one, images, statistics, charts, tables, graphs, experiments, interviews. Kind of, provides a short list of alternatives, but also we want to encourage students to use some of these things, but also get in the habit as they do so to acknowledge and cite their sources. So, and we also want to stress, in any other ways students may seek help from others, to encourage them to acknowledge that they did so, that they asked so-and-so a source and they got help. So I have the source for most of the content in this slide there at the bottom. Any questions? So what I'd like to tell students, is don't be discouraged. I hope they don't get overwhelmed. Because I think searching alone can be a big task for them, right? So I wrote here, students should be encouraged to use those materials listed on the previous slides, right? Mix it up. I encourage them to use slides, graphs, for example, pictures, images, but to learn how to do so responsibly, right? We want to get out of this subculture of just copying everything and not attributing where you got it from. And again, I've mentioned it before, is just because it's accepted in circles, it's still not right, right? So I think it's a good habit to get them into that acknowledgement, right? In a transparent fashion, right? What does that mean? No secrets, no lies. And so if they are aware of this at the beginning, then hopefully, it doesn't become a problem later on. So, but I think these are some of the main things I was thinking about in terms of, how to address in general format ethics to students, but also obviously related to the library, right? Library research. Academic integrity, that's another characteristic, right? We want our students to follow and learn. So I try to break it down that, it's not always writing. It could also be research, independent research. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, kind of to broaden, hopefully the one's awareness of the different types of research, right? But I wrote here things to avoid, this is what we don't want students to do, right? And that is plagiarize. And it's specifically two types of plagiarism. There's the intentional, and then there's the unintentional. I think the first one, the unintentional, is very important because again, that stems from ignorance, not knowing, not being aware. And so they may not even know they're doing something wrong. So again, something we want to teach our students and coach. And of course, the intentional one, I think, is the more obvious one because research misconduct is unethical behavior. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to give examples of, like I said, it's not just writing, but research, real world research. And so they have two guidelines, right? Ethical guidelines to follow. So hopefully we can give more context to this introduction to students or students. So how do you avoid plagiarizing? If we understand fully what plagiarizing means, the copying of someone else's work, right? But the unintentional is that they don't even know they're doing it. So we want to coach them, teach them on how to, right? And we covered that in previous presentations. But in short, how do you avoid it? So cite your sources, right? If you get in that habit of doing so, it doesn't become a problem later on. It preserves authority and gives credit, Doing so, I think, instills, we talk about, citizenship and civil duties, I think when you get into the habit of citing your sources, as most journalists do, they can start maybe in a small scale to start understanding more what authority means, when we talked about that in previous presentations and how an author creates that, establishing credit, right? Reputation through proper attribution, again, acknowledgement, attribution. How else do you avoid plagiarizing? Have an accurate and thorough bibliography. The last presentation I talked about annotated bibliography. If you have a good one, it's a great tool. Use one consistent note-taking. I know I mentioned that before, but I've also done a presentation on note-taking. So have one system and stick to it. Be thorough, be consistent. When students write summaries and they paraphrase material, it should always be in their own words. So not only in their own words, in their own sentence structure, right? Because the instructors can tell when a student, all of a sudden sounds different, right? So let's get them in the habit of doing so. And when they do so, it's not a big deal. And so planning ahead, time management. Don't take any shortcuts. If we establish these at the beginning, then I think they avoid more situations like unintentional, right? Plagiarism. So, any questions? We're almost done. So, right, we're at the library in a community college, and I've been talking about students mostly and being ethical and encouraging them to acknowledge and attribute. But I also wanted to introduce the other types of ethical principles and situations they may encounter and that exist out there. And there's a lot more than these. So a great, I think, lesson plan idea or focus that we can go maybe after this presentation series, but I thought these were unique, and I got these from this article. What is ethics in research and why is it important? So objectivity, I've talked about bias and how hard it is to really be unbiased, right? But there's, I think, skills that one can learn to minimize those. But another big one that I think is quite evident in today's world, especially, is this conflict of interest, right? A lot of examples of that out there that students could see and understand, hopefully, because they're in the news, because perhaps they're done by famous people, that being ethical, again, the good, the bad, right, at the beginning when we were defining it, comes down, when you have a conflict of interest, and even if it's not meant, even if it's not intentional, right? It could be unintentional. It still doesn't look good. So things I think we can strive for: objectivity, integrity, keep your promises and agreements, right? Act with sincerity, strive for consistency of thought and action. Those are good qualities. Openness, share data. What does that mean? Share data, you share your results, your ideas, your tools, right? You're in a community of learning. It should be common. But also that means be open to criticism, right? There's another part to that. Being transparent or transparency, disclose methods. I've talked about that, I think 2 presentations ago, about the methods, research methods. So different types of research require different types of methods, but the disclosure of them, right? You're transparent, you share all this information. And then you publish in a responsible way, right? You're going to publish, and it says, yeah, I thought it was interesting, to advance research and scholarship, not just to advance your career. So I thought that was a good example of, again, these ethical principles. Competence. Competence, maintain and improve your own professional competence and expertise through lifelong education and learning. We've talked about the authority we try and look for in authors, right? And resources. So I think this is something worth spending some time on, is talking to students about competence and how you maintain that, right? How do you improve that? How you maintain that? And they too can start with their own work, right? It doesn't have to be just published authors, for example. Legality, okay? The main thing about this one is that ignorance is no excuse. There are laws that you may not know, but it's your responsibility. Again, we talked about accountability, right? And responsibility. It's your job to know that. So I think it's an appropriate ethical principle. Social responsibility, again, a topic very well in today's world, right? Strive to promote social good and prevent or mitigate social harms through research, public education, and advocacy. So again, another example, another detour that one can take with this idea of ethics with students. I think social responsibility is a nice one. And the last one that I wanted to highlight were subjects, right? They may or may not know we have ethics when they do actual research on humans and or animals, right? So again, it's not the same as writing a research paper, but it kind of hopefully illustrates, how far this goes, right? And so this could be an area of relevance as well. When conducting research on human subjects, minimize harm and risks and maximize benefits, right? So it provides, I think, a framework of thinking, a place to start. Respect human dignity, privacy, autonomy. These are things I think that could be incorporated with critical thinking, a lot of critical thinking exercise. Take special precautions with vulnerable populations. Strive to distribute the benefits and the burdens of research fairly. So I got this from David Resnick, 2020. Any questions? This is an example of a website. So I went and searched for, other examples of research. Again, want to provide this context for students that it's not just in libraries that we act that way. It's everywhere. And so hopefully they can get a sense of, practicality. So I had found this website that I thought was interesting, not so much of where it came from, but because it lists the, kind of specific agencies and organizations that focus specifically on this issue, right? Especially in the sciences. And so I thought, wow, I'm not a science person, but there's reasons why we need these, right? So that mean a lot. I mean, that have a lot on it. So I just wanted to share an example of one, right? And one can take again, an idea for teaching this even further if one wanted. But again, the one we use and the one we focus for students is the code of conduct. So I still think that that's the primary thing they need to know for sure. Be aware of. But I thought it was interesting finding this, especially since we just finished an election. The fact that politics does not have to be accurate. There's actually a law that doesn't forbid it. So I thought it was interesting. This video talked about that. And so, you know, how do we help students decipher and divide true and factual from this thing called politics, right? That doesn't have to be either one.
I think that's rich coming from Jake Tapper.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Well, it may be, but I mean, I think
That's
the point still is important, right? That here we're talking about ethics and being truthful and all this stuff, and all of a sudden we're bombarded with these types of things, and it's legal. I think that's worthy of, hey, you know, something's not right here, but there's a reason for it. So, and it's called politics, and that's a different class, different location. But still, I think it was relevant to, you know, there's a lot of examples like this. So the need, I think, is still great. Although the pipeline for information has increased.
Yeah, politicians should be forced to take an ethics course.
So we are the library, and we've done presentations on how to do the APA, the MLA, the Turabian. We have a lot of resources, both in print as well as online, specifically from this page. Remember, I had you write down research guide. So we have a page specifically for citing.
Perfect.
Citing your sources, and we've broken them down into the specific styles. And within, after you click on each style, it'll be a different website that will then have handouts.
Awesome.
I think, I don't know if I printed the next one. No, that's the last one. So if I were to print, if I were to click right here, the APA, this would change. And then there are some handouts here that you could.
Okay.
And we have two, a short version and a long version. And then I'm sure there are other links there for other things, and I can help you as well. I just didn't want to make this presentation solely on citing, because we've done this so many times and we have this resource, but I'm here to help. So if you need the help, I'll help you, but I really wanted to introduce that and expand, because I had never done so, that topic of ethics and how to apply it with students. But this is our research guide, our live guide, and it has all the everything you need really for the citing, and we have some handouts out at front too as well.
Okay, and then those computers out there, they hook up to those two printers here on the table?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that concludes my presentation. These are meant to be short, but there were 6 of them, around 30 minutes. Today was a little shorter than that, but any questions before we close? So hopefully this one's being recorded and it'll be preserved on the research guide that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And if you need any help, I'm available in just a couple minutes.
Thank you. I think I'll be pretty good from here for the moment. What's your schedule like here during the week?
Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Gotcha. I'm gonna put that down.